Good afternoon, everybody. Today we're going to work on lesson 7, which involves text, using the text tool. I'm not going to do the exercise step by step as I have been, but I do want to show you all of the features with the text tool that are included here and let you know what each of the tools do, because it is fairly, it's not complicated to use, but there's a lot there that many different ways in which to control type. A couple of things that they've done here that they cover, and this is the finished version here. So is that you'll notice that they have used the text itself as a mask, as a layer mask to be able to insert an image. You can also wrap text along a path. That's another thing that they've done here. But what I want to show you, most important, is that if we go to, let me click in here, and I go to Window, and I look at Character, and I bring up the Character panel. This is what I want to focus on today. That to be able to determine the font that you use, to be able to determine the size of type that you use, the leading, the kerning, the tracking. You can adjust the proportions vertically or horizontally. Be able to adjust the base line, and there are these other features down here as well that we can focus on. So this is the finished version, and what they give you here, the start version, is really what we left off, where we left off with lesson 6. Okay, and then here's the TIFF file that they have. It's going to be put inside the text and that sort of thing. So here's my blank screen here to show you how text works. So I need the character panel up. That's important. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to come over here to the left under Tools, and our text tool is down here. You'll notice that we have a couple of options. You can, by default, text is inserted so that when you type the text out, it goes horizontally. You can also have it go, work vertically. And that's especially important if you're, using text in a foreign language, in Chinese or something like that, or I think in Hebrew, sort of thing. But also what they have done with this particular lesson, if we go back to the finished version again, you can see where it says volume 9. That's where we've used it vertically here. So in rare instances, in the Western world, we use text vertically. I don't encourage you to do that here. Typically, vertical text, especially in large quantities, is very difficult to read. This would be an exception to the rule. Okay. The other options that are available here too are that if you want to use it as a mask, vertical or horizontal, and I never use those two. I just have no need to. It's unnecessary. So we're going to start with the horizontal, and how it works is at the top. You can work at the top in the options panel or menu here, or in the character panel. You can just start by using the default font, and then just click anywhere. Boom. And it gives you what it's called Greeking. It's kind of the default text to give you an idea of what it's going to look like and what size. The default size, at least for my last setting, is 15 points. Another thing that I can cover today or maybe Wednesday will be how type is measured, how it's categorized, things like that. And I have a little handout that's on my website that you're free to look at and I can talk about. to go over those things so you understand the terminology used when talking about type. Anyway, if I want to enlarge the type, I can do it a number of different ways in a number of different places. You'll notice that I can do it over here in the properties panel. I can do it here from the character panel. I can do it in the options menu along the top. You know, whatever is convenient for you, it really doesn't matter. Then I can come over here and I can select the font. So I can go down here and notice that as I scroll through here, that on the screen it's changing, but because of the size, it's kind of hard to see what it looks like. If I want to change the size, I can also click here in the character panel, and I can select from some default sizes here. So let's crank it up to like 60 points, and I'm going to move it over like so. So you can see what's going on. So we have some, you know, let me actually make it even bigger. And another thing that it's nice with Photoshop, that if I click on the little character, the icon to the left, I can click and drag to the left, and that reduces it in size, or I can click and drag to the right, and that increases it in size. So you don't have to pick a specific type size. You can just scroll, basically, or click and drag to get what you're going for. To finish the type, you just click the little checkbox or hit return, or actually rather not hit return, but you hit the, click on the move tool, and that finishes it. So how you add type is that you can insert type if maybe you've created some text in another program. Hold on one second. I have a couple of questions here. Okay. Do you want us to use their pic or our own pic that we originally made to the girl? Just use their picture. Yeah, you don't have to use yours. No, every time you do a separate lesson, just start with their start file and then continue. Okay, does that help, Markeisha? Yeah. Anyway, so go ahead and to select the type. So for example, if I want to do a little vanity thing, I could put my name here. I have all caps here. That's what this little thing does. So I'm going to turn that off. Kirk Miller. Okay. So if I continue to type, it will just continue on one, you know, continue typing. It doesn't have an automatic return. In order to get a second row or a third row of text, if it's for a headline or a subhead or something like that, you have to hit the return key. And then here's, you know, some, you know, more text. Okay. And then you can hit the return key again and again and again. But that's usually reserved, when you do it that way, it's usually reserved for headlines and subheads. If you're inserting copy, you know, body copy, then it's a little bit different. Then how you do that is you start with the text tool, and then you click and drag to determine the size of the text box that you want. And you'll notice that it's filling with the last size that I used. And now when I type, and if I go ahead here instead of that, and let's make it a little bit smaller rather than 76 point, I'm going to make it maybe 14 point. Just, it's still, that would be big for text. But if I could come down here and let's say I just copy paste, notice that it's restricted within the boundaries of that box. And you can always change the size of the box. I can come back in here and change it like so, and notice that it fits within those constraints. The other thing that you can do to control that is by default, especially, well, either with headlines or with blocks of text, it's set to default flush left. You can also have it centered. You can also have it flush right. And if we use paragraph properties, the paragraph panel here, we can also specify that we want it justified. And that means that it will fit flush left and right. And then you have the option at the bottom, whether you want it to, the last line to be flush left, or do you want it to be centered at the bottom, or do you want it to be flush right at the bottom, or do you want it to be justified at the bottom? In most cases, that looks kind of horrendous. So that's what these do here. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to go back to the default flush left. So that's for headlines, subheads, and body copy. And as I said, you can just copy paste text inside the box that you're going to use. So that's how that works. The other thing that you might want to take note of is that as I've been adding different text blocks, that they automatically are added on a new layer. And that's kind of nice. And you can see that if you have the block of text or the others, that it will automatically, for example, as you add and edit the text, the first few words of that text will be placed inside the layer so that you know which it is. And that's it. Okay, and you can, like everything else, you can turn it off or turn it on, or you can take the whole layer, you can, delete it and do whatever you want with it. Okay, so let's go over these properties one by one in the character panel so you can see what's going on here. So I'll go back to the text tool, and I'm going to highlight what I want to be affected. So that could be a line of type, a block of type. It could be an individual character, a word, words, whatever. Just highlight it. And then I can specify in here what size that I want. That's what this is. As I said, if I want to change the font, then I can click here, and you can scroll through all of these until you find something that maybe you're happy with. And again, every single character can be different from the others. So that's how you change that. Then the next one over to the right, this is called leading. Okay, leading is the space between the lines of text. And you'll notice that there's a huge gap between line 1 and line 2. And I can't spell my own name. I forgot the I in there. There we go. So if I want to close that up, or if I want to increase the space, then again, you highlight what you want to affect, and then I can come over here, and I can either, right now, auto is selected, and that's a good place to start. But then I can come in here, and it's usually based on the size that we're using. So that could be, if I'm using 76 point, it's probably 78 or 79. If I come back in here, it would be easier for me if I just clicked on the little left thing and use the spinner. I call it the spinner, but to click and drag to determine how tight I want it. And you can see that it's getting pretty tight here. I want it to be almost touching the two lines so that it reads, especially for a headline, that it reads as a unit, not as two lines with a huge gap in the middle. I hate type that's set with huge gaps between the lines. It really bothers me. If it's too tight, then sometimes it makes it difficult to read, especially with body copy. So in those instances, I might open it up a little bit. So that's what this does. This is the leading. This is the kerning. So kerning is selectively adjusting the space between individual letter forms or words. So for example, if I wanted less space between the E and the M, right now I have, I just hit the space bar and I hit it once. But if I want much less, or I want to adjust it myself, I can come in here. And again, I can use some default settings here, and you can either add or subtract. So let's say I want -100. And you'll notice that it just, that -100 units, it tightened it up just a little bit. Okay. Some designers like setting their type really tight. Others do not. For most most of the time I start with the default settings and then make adjustments thereafter. But again, I can come back in here if I want it set really tight so that they're almost touching or maybe even overlapping. I could do that, you know, so for a design or aesthetic effect, that would be how you would do that. Okay, so this is the kerning. That's what this one does. Okay, so I'm going to go back here. I'm going to go back to 0 and reset that. The next one over to the right of that is tracking. And it is also selectively adjusting the spacing, but it affects the entire line of text, not individual letter forms. So in this particular instance, what if I wanted, let's move all that over. What if I wanted my name to be the same width as the second line, but I didn't have room in my design to increase the size of it, nor maybe did I want to increase the size of it, and I wanted it uniformly changed. So how I do that, again, is I come back with the text tool, I select the line of text, and now with the tracking, I go ahead and I click and I drag until it matches the width of the line underneath. And there you have it. And that's used very frequently in design for aesthetics. Again, in order, it's used mostly for headlines or titles of books or titles of movies or things like that, so that it has more of a feel that maybe a logo would have, or some sort of you know, branding kind of mark. So that's what that would be done for. It's rarely done when you're setting body copy. Usually that's just set by default. But that's another very helpful or useful tool. So I'm going to leave that as is, but let's move on to the next one. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this again. And let's say I wanted the text to touch almost to the top of my page, and I don't have a condensed font that I want to use. Well, I could come back in here and I could change the height of it. Now this, I caution you against using this tool that changes the vertical and this one that changes the horizontal, because it distorts the type. And the type designers who develop these fonts would cringe if you were if they saw you doing this. But it does allow you to do that. So you can see already that, because if I were to change the size of the type, it also expands to fit the width as well. So this fixes the width, but then I can adjust the height independent of the width. Likewise, this one does the same thing. So if I come, but for the horizontal. So if I come back in here and I set this to 0 again, so I go back to where I was. Oh, come on. 0. Oh, I guess I want it 100%. My mistake. There we go. So that goes back like so. So let's say instead, what if I wanted the second line to look like it was more condensed or flattened or squished? Well, I could do the same, you know, something very similar with that. I could go ahead and highlight it, and we could change here. We could change the width of this like so. Now, as I stretch it out, notice how it's getting flatter. And if I bring it closer together, it looks condensed. So they both do something very similar. Okay. Likewise, I could take this one and I could flatten it like so. And I could stretch it out like so, so that you can control the width and the height of your text. So that's what these two do. So I'm going to go back to 100%. And I'm going to go back to 100%. I got that there. You can control the color of the text from over here. You can control the text from up here. You can control the text from over here in a bunch of different places. And again, every single individual letter form can be a different color. With most of these features, you can control, with some exceptions. If I wanted a different font for every single letter, I could do that. The next thing that I want you to take note of, though, is this tool here. Notice that as I have the text selected, that the text rests on this little line that will not be visible when you actually check the OK, the little OK button, or you select the move tool, that it disappears. But you'll notice that the text rests on that line. In typography terms, that's called the baseline. And there are times when you want the text to rise above or below the baseline, especially when you're having it follow a path, that sometimes you will need it to be above or below. Well, that's what this does. And you'll notice that here I can click on this, I can select, and I can do that for individual letters, for example. I can have that, be raised above, and then this one, maybe I can have this letter and I can have it go below the text like so, for different effects. Now, there are tools in Adobe Illustrator for their type that allow you to rotate the individual letter forms that are not available in Photoshop. For those of you familiar with Illustrator, its type tools, or its ability to work with type, is more effective than Photoshop. But in most cases, Photoshop will get you where you need to be very quickly. So that's what this one does. So I'll go ahead and go back. Whoops, I got to highlight it. That would be helpful. And again, I can use that little spinner. I can highlight it again and use the spinner, or I can type in individual letter forms. So if you're wondering what these guys do down here, okay, they do a variety of things. Now, what if I wanted all caps? I could select the text and I can click this button here. I'm sorry, the wrong one. This creates a faux bold. And again, that's for fonts where bold does not exist. And again, I caution you against using that. It does distort the type. So when I click there, that's a faux bold. That's what that one does. This one is a faux italic. So again, if the font doesn't have a built-in or designed italic, then this creates that. So again, you click on it, and again, it can be for an individual letter form or an entire line of text. The next one over is that if I want all caps, then that's what that does. So that you don't have to hold down the caps lock. The next one that I like using a lot, especially for headlines, because what I caution you against, and this is later on when we're doing the movie poster, if we do a book cover or something like that, that if you have a large block of text and it's entirely in caps, sometimes it's very difficult for the reader to read, or the viewer to read. So, it's use all caps sparingly. Okay. But what you could do is a substitute if you want to emphasize the lines of text and you don't want to use initial caps with lowercase, but you want to have a more dynamic feel, then you can use the next one. And this one here is small caps. So it takes all the lowercase letters and it turns them into caps, but they're much smaller than your capital letters. And that for headlines, subheads, titles of books, titles of movies, and that sort of thing can be very effective. And again, that's all done with a click of the mouse. The next one here is that, let's say I had a 1 after this, like so. And if you want superscript or subscript, That's what this does. So if I highlight this and I click this one, notice that it shrinks it and it moves it above. If I click this one, it moves it below. If you want the text underlined, so let's say if I want some more text, and this tends to look a little horsey, that will underline it. And instead, if you want, or in addition to, if you want a strike through, that's what this one does. Okay. Now, some text has, you know, if you want to use, for example, let's go back again, let's take more and I do first. So if I have one ST and I highlight this like so, and I use this one, is it going to do it? No, how about here? Let's do this one. Whoops, just select the one and see if we can do that. No, it's not going to do it. So it's not going to allow me to do it for this one. The same with half and fractions, that some fonts will allow you to do it and some will not. But that's what these do. If there's special characters that are available, or ligatures, and ligatures are and again, it's not for everything. It might be for this one. What if I have an FI here with Caslon FI? Whoops. Oh, come on. FI. I don't want caps lock on. Let's turn that off. So let's do that again. FI. What the heck is going on here? Let's turn that off. There you go. Notice with Caslon, it has that where it takes the F and the I, and it's a, you know, it's a, if you're really a type hound, it really can enhance the aesthetics of what you're doing. It combines the F and I, and there are other letter forms that it uses frequently, like S and T's and things like that, and we'll combine them together. So that's what that does. And there's a variety of these down here. You'll notice that some are grayed out, some are visible. So it depends on what you want to do. And you can always add little, you know, ornamental elements as well. So let's click that. And let's undo a few times, and let's go back. So what are some of the other things that we can do with type? Notice down here we have English, USA English, and we have sharp. So if you want the type to be smooth or you want it to be crisp, these are settings that you can use here. This one over here controls it tells Photoshop what language you are writing the text in. So for example, if I were to come over here, let's use this again, and I were to write the word Montreal. Okay, and I were to highlight this, and let's say I'm writing this in French or Canadian French. Okay, you don't see a change right now. But if I were to come back in and I were to do the spell check in here, so let me highlight this, and let's just do the spell check for the whole thing. I'm going to go back to edit, and I'm going to select check spelling here. And the little widget should pop up in a minute. And you'll notice that I get an error message for Montreal, because in French, you need an accent grave over the E. So it notes that, and I can go ahead and I can say change or change all, and it automatically adds it and it says it's complete. So that's what that does. Now, likewise, if this were in English, so let's highlight this again, and that could be UK English, it could be American English, whatever. Let's go back and use USA English here. And it's highlighted again, and I go back and I do the spell check again, and watch, it's going to find an error here and here. So I'll do check spelling. And again, I get an error message, because in English, we don't put the accent over the E. If you were to leave it, it wouldn't be incorrect. But wouldn't necessarily be correct either if you wanted it to be entirely in English. So I can go ahead and I can, change this one and we're done. So that's what this refers to with spell check. So the next thing that we're going to do here, we've got a bunch of other features that are available in here. And this will be useful. It could be useful for your postcard. It could be useful for the movie poster when we do that. But when you select the text here, let me get rid of Montreal from here. I'll get rid of that line here. Notice up here in the options menu, I have warp text. Right now there's none selected, but what if I want it to arc? And now I can control the degree of bend, like so. Sometimes it really distorts the text, sometimes it doesn't. You can also go ahead and we can use some of the others if you want it to bulge, like so. And I can control the amount of bulge. And this can be really good, really useful for a number of different, effects. Vertical distortion, horizontal distortion. And these are all, what's nice about this is that they're non-destructive, is that it is, this particular text warp feature is non-destructive. That if I click OK and I go, oh, I really don't like that, I really screwed it up, or I think that the, the client doesn't like it, that you'll notice that the little warp symbol has been added to this. So if I double click on that, here, let's select it again, and we'll click again, the warp again, and it brings it back up. So now if I go back and I select none, it just goes back to where it was. So that makes that very useful and very helpful. So you shouldn't be afraid of using these features in here, because just about everything that I've shown you so far is non-destructive. The next thing we want to do with this is, what if you want type to follow a path in text? It could be a circle, it could be a square, it could be a little squiggly line. So if I go ahead over here, and usually this is a two-step process. So if I start with a pen tool, and I don't want a shape, I want a path, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna make a nice little curved line here, like so. I'm gonna come back up here. And I'm gonna come back and edit this a little bit. So let's go back here. I'm gonna come back in here. Let's move this over and pull this out a little bit. And let's pull this down a little bit. Let's pull this over a little bit. So I have this wavy line here. Okay, come back with the path selection tool, and I'm good to go. So now what I want to do is I want to join the text with it. So once you have your path in place, now I can move, when I move the text over the path, notice that the cursor changes, and that's what you're doing with this lesson. So since I have the text set for centered, I would probably want to make sure that my text is about in the center here. And whoa, look at what it did. It used the last size that I created here. So I probably want to shrink this down a little bit, like so. And you'll notice also where there are abrupt bends in the text, that sometimes the spacing between the text doesn't work so hot. So you might have to adjust your texture, your path. And what you can do with the move tool here, so I'll switch and use the move tool, is that I can click in here and I can slide this along, kind of like, on railroad track or on rails. I can slide this and move it, so that it's upside down, right side up, and have it slide along the path, like so, after it's done. And I can always go back with the path editing tool. I can use the direct selection tool and come back and I can edit the path. So this now looks a little bit better, the letter spacing along here. It's not so abrupt. Okay, now that's one use there. Now another one is, as I said, what if you're creating a mark, a circular mark for yourself? Well, I can come back here with the ellipse tool, and I don't want it to be a shape. I want it to be a path. And it could be an ellipse or it could be a perfect circle, doesn't matter, like so. And then while it's selected, again, use the text tool. Click on here. Whoops, I don't want it inside. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I'm going to undo. But I want it to select the text tool, because that would be an option too. Do you want it inside that to create a shaped block of text? Or do I want it to be on the path itself? So I have to move it on the path. Let's move it over the path and then click, and there you go. And again, I can probably change the size a little bit. It might be a little bit too big, like so. And again, I can use the arrow tool to move it around a little bit, so to get it into position like so. And again, you can highlight the text, with the text tool. Instead of using the Greeking, you're just using that for a placeholder. Okay, and put, my name again. Okay, and we can go ahead and select the rest of the text. Get rid of that. And we've got a bunch of text in there that we don't need. Guess I created a whole slew of text inside that. My goodness. Jeez Louise. Didn't realize I had created so much. Well, I just want to get rid of it. Oh, it just keeps going and going, doesn't it? Wow. Well, let me just do this. Yeah, I don't know why it's doing that. It shouldn't be that much. It just keeps going and going and going. And normally, there we go. Finally got all of it done, removed. So I can go back to the text tool. And again, we can, put it on the inside of the circle. We can pull it out on the outside, and we can slide it around like so. So that's how that works. So how am I doing on time? One more thing that I wanted to cover today. Okay, we're doing pretty good. So in the particular instance that they have here in the end, if you want text to fill, use it as a clipping mask. That's a nice effect too. That can be really, really nice. You can see that they've used some of the others here. Change the color, change the leading, flush right, have it follow path, that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and move the text here. Whoops, I didn't want to do that. I want to move the whole thing. Let's go ahead. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my name here, and I'm going to switch to a font that is really fat, where you'd be able to see something inside it if we chose to do so. So instead of Adobe Caslon Pro, let's find something. You could use Arial Black as a good one. Impact would be another good one, but this is a good one. Okay, so I'm going to change, whoops, let's move that here. Let's select the other one. And move these down here so that they're out of the way. Let's move this one down here. So I want to take this one. I'm just going to get rid of the other ones. We don't need them. Nope, I didn't want to get rid of that one. I want to get rid of this one. There we go. And I guess I have one floating around here somewhere too. So I just have this one. So I want to put an image inside the text. How do you do that? Well, let's go back to our circuit board here. Could be any image, it really doesn't matter. And I can go ahead and I can, when I select it, I can go ahead and I can move it over to mine. So using the move tool, I click and I drag and I move it up to mine. And then I come down and I release. You can see that it's on top of the text. And that's what I want. I want the text to be used as a mask. So the image that's going to go inside it needs to be above it, immediately above it on another layer. And now what I can do is that I can hold down the Option or Alt key on the PC, Option key on the Mac, Alt key on the PC. And when I hold it down and I move the cursor between those two layers, notice how it changes. It goes from the finger to one with a little, it changes with a box to a little bent arrow. And now when I click, notice that it places it inside that. So now I have a choice. I can, with this layer selected, I can always resize it. So I could hit Command T to resize it so that it fits more comfortably inside my text. If you want it placed in a different location, I can always do that. So you can see how it's, I'm changing the placement of it. So just by moving that layer, you can do that. Or of course you can move the text. And if I move the text out of the range of the image underneath, whoops, had the wrong layer selected. There we go. So kind of a similar, it keeps wanting to select that. So anyway, that's how you affect that. And that can be kind of nice. And I think it is a good use of this effect in this particular exercise. It works really nice. So let me go ahead and with the move tool, let's go ahead and let's move this into position so it looks a little bit nicer in here. Okay, that looks pretty good. So what if, we've already used some of these, but what if we wanted to do something else in here? We wanted to enhance this even more. Well, we have all of our layer effects that we can add to this. So that's another with this. If I want to add a drop shadow, I can. And we can make sure, let's turn on preview to make sure that that's available. Why isn't it? Oh, I have the wrong layer selected, so never mind. Gotta make sure that the type layer is selected, not the image that goes inside it. So let's add drop shadow. There we go. So we can control the direction of it. And again, these layer effects, like the masking and that sort of thing, are all editable or non-destructive. So you can do some really nice things with it. You can control the distance, the spread, the size of it all, its orientation regarding global light. We can also add some other nice effects like bevel and emboss. That's kind of cool. We can go ahead and we can increase the size of that a little bit so it has more of a three-dimensional look. And then on top of that, if I was happy with this, I could come back with this layer again, this text layer, and I could go ahead and let's go ahead and highlight the text. Since remember, all of this is editable, and I can change the font, I can change the, edit it if I find it misspelling, and I can go ahead and I can add my maybe a flag wave to this, like so. and deselect. And there you go. You've created something that can be pretty interesting without a lot of muss or fuss. Now, sometimes it's easy to overuse some of these effects and kind of go nuts with them. But I think, you know, when you demonstrate a little bit of constraint, they can be pretty darn effective. As I said, for those of you familiar with Illustrator, Illustrator has even more controls that you can work with regarding type than Photoshop does. So it can do even more. It's, if I were going to make a mark of some sort or a logo, Illustrator would be the program I would use, not Photoshop. Okay, but for, you know, as I said, for us in designing book covers and designing the postcard and designing movie posters and stuff, there's plenty for us to be able to do in here. Okay, so this can be really nice. These are all the features that we have available to us in here. So are there any questions before we wrap it up today? I'm done a little bit early. Used, you know, 45 minutes or so of our time. Yes, no? So if there aren't, for a moment here, let me go ahead and pause this. I'm going to pause the recording. So that wraps up my recording of this demonstration today. But I'm going to turn off the recording again, and I'm going to ask all of you about the assignment, the postcard, to see if you have any questions about it. And then I'll take those from you individually if you don't want yourself to be recorded. Okay, so I'm going to sort of say bye-bye. You don't have to leave just now, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the recording. And then that will be it for today's demonstration.